Atlantis traveling 3,200 miles an hour. The propulsion officer in Mission Control reports that the orbital maneuvering system engines have ignited. Atlantis kicking on the afterburners.
Copy, 2 engine down.
Atlantis flying on the singular power of its 3 liquid fuel main engines, draining about a half a ton of fuel per second from the large fuel tank. Coming up on the 3-minute mark into the flight, Atlantis 46 miles in altitude, 81 miles downrange, traveling almost 4,000 miles an hour. Atlantis speeding straight as an arrow toward its date with the International Space Station Wednesday morning. Three and a half minutes into the flight, all of Atlantis' systems functioning by the book. 55 miles in altitude, 120 miles downrange, traveling almost 5,000 miles an hour.
Atlantis, negative return.
Atlantis copies, negative return.
Atlantis now too far downrange, too high in altitude to return to the launch site in the event of an engine failure. All 3 engines performing perfectly. 4 minutes, 20 seconds into the flight. Atlantis now 62 miles in altitude, 180 miles downrange, traveling almost 6,000 miles an hour. All systems performing normally. Atlantis on course, on track for its preliminary orbit. The Environmental Systems Officer reports a good flash evaporator system activated for Atlantis, providing cooling for the shuttle's avionics until the payload bay doors are opened about an hour and a half into the flight.
Atlantis, press to ATO.
Copy, press to ATO.
That call up from Capcom Chris Ferguson indicating that Atlantis can now make minimal orbital altitude targets in the event of an engine failure. However, all 3 engines continue to perform normally, as do the auxiliary power units and the 3 power-producing fuel cells. 5.5 minutes into the flight, Atlantis now 67 miles in altitude, 312 miles downrange, traveling almost 8,000 miles an hour.
Thanks for single engine ops 3.
Atlantis now beginning to roll to a heads-up position, the main engine swiveling, enabling the shuttle to move to a heads-up position above its fuel tank, gaining more favorable communications through the tracking and data relay satellite system as it heads uphill.
Atlantis, press to MECO, single engine Zaragoza 104.
Press to MECO, single engine Zaragoza 104.
That call from Capcom Chris Ferguson to Commander Charlie Hobaugh indicating that Atlantis can make normal orbital cutoff targets in the event of an engine failure.
Go for the pitch.
Okay, nominal shutdown, go for plus X, go for the pitch.
Now 6 minutes, 45 seconds into the flight. Atlantis 66 miles in altitude, almost 500 miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center, traveling almost 11,000 miles an hour. 90 seconds left in powered flight.
Single engine press 104.
Single engine press 104.
Coming up on the 7.5 minute mark into the flight, the main engines will once again be throttled down to limit the stress on the shuttle and its 6 crew members to that of 3 times the effect of gravity. Atlantis approaching a speed of more than 4 miles a second. At the time of main engine cutoff a minute from now, Atlantis will enter its preliminary orbit at a speed of 5 miles a second. Seven minutes, 40 seconds into the flight. Atlantis providing 8 minutes, 10 seconds into the flight. Standing by for main engine cutoff. Main engine cutoff confirmed by the booster officer. Standing by for external tank separation. And the bird's eye view from the external tank camera of external tank separation. Atlantis now in its preliminary orbit. Commander Charlie Hobaugh will now maneuver Atlantis so that cameras embedded in the shuttle's umbilical well can perform photography of the discarded external fuel tank. And Mike Foreman and Leland Melvin are about to use digital still and video cameras to capture handheld imagery of the tank for downlink a few hours from now. A flawless climb to orbit for the shuttle Atlantis and its 6 crew members en route now to the International Space Station.
Ohms 1 is not required. Fergie will meet you in the post, Ohms 1.
And we'll see you there, Scorch.
Hey, Fergie, for Tom.
Main engine, both burners continue to burn well. Attitude disturbances at separation nominal. Guidance controlling nicely.
Again, a beautiful view from the second stage of the Delta vehicle as it continues to rise, now 1 minute 39 seconds after liftoff. The next event will occur when the main engine cutoff occurs at about...
Main engine, both burners continue to burn well. Vehicle now at an altitude of 21.5 nautical miles. Downrange distance 45 nautical miles. Velocity over 3,000 miles per hour.
A wonderful view of the Earth's limb as we rise above the Earth's surface with our Mars Climate Orbiter and the fairing of this Delta vehicle. Two minutes, 15 seconds after launch. Everything continues to look good.
First stage continues to burn very well. Flight path right at the nominal predix.
We're at launch plus 2 minutes, 45 seconds.
Now in an altitude of 34 nautical miles, downrange distance 90 nautical miles, velocity over 4,800 miles per hour. Guidance continues to control nicely. Booster maintaining a very nominal flight path. All pressures and currents remain stable.
Again, everything continues to go well with launch of our Delta rocket and the Mars Climate Orbiter. The orbiter is expected to reach Mars in September of 1999.
Still about 30 seconds away from a nominal MECO. Altitude 49 nautical miles. Downrange distance 198 nautical miles. Velocity over 9,000 miles per hour.
Real-time calls, of course, coming in through the telemetry lab as Eric Anderson looks at the real-time data as it is arriving from the vehicle. Coming up in the next 10 seconds for main engine cutoff.
We have float switches. Fuel and locks. MECO is in.
And we have main engine cutoff.
Main engine has cut off. Vernier still burning. Vernier, VECO, verniers have cut off.